Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and finally using the August 2018 card kit from Simon Says Stamp. I just posted a unboxing video of this kit a couple days ago, and I lost no time in creating cards with it. I just couldn't create one, I wanted to create several. So I have the MANDY'S Flower Shed stamp set here, and it is a 6x8 stamp set, so it's quite large. There's a bunch of images in it. And I have some distress watercolor paper here, and I have the smooth side facing up. And I'm stamping the images from the set with Simon's Intense Black ink. And this ink I like to use when I'm Copic coloring, but this ink also works really well with watercolor. It's just a good waterproof ink. So I stamped the images onto the watercolor paper, and then I just trimmed them apart just so I could flip it around. A little bit of a thing with me. And then for the watercoloring, I'm using the PinkFresh Studios liquid watercolors, which I just posted a video yesterday using them. This was actually the first time using them. It's just with all my editing and everything I have on my plate right now, everything's kind of backwards for me. So this is my first time using these, my first kind of experimenting and whatnot. And I just added little drops of it to my glass craft mat. You could use any just non-porous surface. You could use a little palette, or use a ceramic plate. Anything like that will work. But yeah, I just added little drops, and then I was just picking up the color with a paintbrush that I would wet with clean water. Pick up the color, paint it. Really, really simple. I did a whole bunch of color mixing because I was really trying to sort of mimic the colors that were in the pattern papers that come with this kit. I really liked the colors. And plus I was planning on using some of the pattern papers. So I would kind of mix some of the pinks and yellows together because it was kind of a peachy sort of color and that sort of thing. So I just would fiddle and mix and did a whole bunch of color layering with all of these images. And basically I had Netflix on my laptop on my desk, and this was late at night when I was doing this, and I would just, watch Friends or play it. I don't even need to watch it. I've seen it so many times over the years. I let that play, and then I would just sit and color. So to get a deeper shade of green, because this green is very, very bright, I use its contrasting color, which is technically red. They're on the opposite sides of the color wheel. So I added a bit of pink to that green. That's how you get that more olive shade. And then I pulled the color down into the jar because, you don't always have to do this. But as I was thinking, I was like, well, the jar's transparent. You would see the stems. So I just pulled it down to kind of mimic the stems in the jar. Someone asked me that about that because I showed the image on Instagram. So I just wanted to explain what I did. I just kind of visualized where the stem would go and pulled the color down, and it was good enough. So I kept going along and adding more and more color to the flowers, especially because I have a thing for tulips. I especially really love the yellow tulips that have like the pink and red on the edges. I think those are just so pretty. All tulips are pretty, but those ones are, for some reason, every time I color tulips, that's the color combo I go for. It's just a weird thing I have that every time I see tulips, that's just what I think. So I kept adding and deepening those colors until I was finally decided it's time to stop before I start mudding everything up. And then I took the licorice liquid watercolor and I watered it down because it's very black. So I had a bit of just a lighter gray and added a bit of shading in the jar and a little bit below the leaves, but this part is kind of not necessary because I am going to fussy cut this out. So a lot of the shading added, it's pointless. But I was just fiddling and enjoying the whole process. So added that bit of shading, and then I'm going to go on and start coloring in all of the other images. And I ended up stamping all of the images from the set and watercoloring them with these watercolors. And I super sped this up because I'm not sure in the end how long it took me because, like I said, I had, a show on and it was at nighttime. The kids are in bed. I'm just enjoying myself. But I did a whole bunch of painting with all of this and just kept picking up the color, and then if the watercolor would get too watered down, I would just add another little drop onto my surface. Started mixing colors and just really enjoying the process. So for this like kind of navy blue color, I actually ended up mixing the sapphire with a bit of the licorice just to really like darken it, to get it closer to the kind of navy shade of blue again in the pattern paper pack. And then there's also kind of a purpley sort of a color. So same thing, I kind of mixed the pink and the purple together to deepen the color and just add that to the flower. And then with the green, I used the green that I had already, you know, turned a little olive before by adding the pink to. But I also took a little bit of that and mixed in a little tiny bit of blue, just to give me another shade of green basically to work with, so that the, you know, leaves and everything are not all the exact same color, because that wouldn't be very realistic either. So I would just go along and paint everything, and then would set aside those to dry, and then I'm working on the other images that I'd stamped as well onto the distress watercolor paper with the intense black ink. And for this like vase, I was thinking tin when I was looking at it. So I used the licorice, but I also added a little bit of the blue to it to paint that. And I would jump back and forth between things because you want to let one area dry and not watercolor the next. Otherwise, color is going to run into each other, which happens on the next image. But I would kind of jump back and forth so that one area could dry and I could work on the next without making a huge, you know, mess. And again, just layering, adding a light layer of color and then going in and adding another layer and then another layer until you're just happy with it. And I got to say, I am very happy with these watercolors so far. They layer amazingly. They don't get, you know, they're not chalky, obviously, because they're liquid, and they're fun. I'm really enjoying them. So I just kept going in and adding these colors and layers and everything else. The easiest thing to watercolor was the fence, because I kept it as simple as possible. You really could add a lot more like depth and dimension and color to it, but I just added the tiniest bit of gray to the fence and just kept it very simple. So just added in that tiny little bit of shading and was fine with it. And between this and the last image, this is actually the next day. So I left everything overnight. My colors end up completely drying on the glass there, which is completely fine. These liquid watercolors, I was curious how they would reactivate with water. See right here, they're completely dry at this point. So they've dried out. Some of them I added more color, just drops of color because I wanted more of certain colors. But other bits of it, like the blue and that, I just re-wet with my water brush and kind of have to mix up a little bit, and they work fine. So you can reactivate these because they're liquid watercolors. I think I said this when I did my haul video showing them. I wouldn't intentionally put these like in a palette and let them dry to rework later. The whole point and the fun part of liquid watercolors is to use them as liquid. But if you do, you know, run out of time or forget or whatever and things dry out, well, you can, yes, reactivate them just fine. So that's what I did, and was able to finish all my painting with just the colors on my palette and only added that little bit because I had wanted, I think it was the purple or whatever it was. So after I had finished all of my painting, I ended up fussy cutting out all of these images because I don't have the die set. I mentioned that in the unboxing video. There is a coordinating die set for this stamp set. It's just on reserve right now. Like, they haven't got it in stock. It'll come in a couple weeks, something like that. I will link to it so you can check it out if you're interested. But I fussy cut everything out and set it aside. And then I had to use the background stamp. I love the background stamp that comes in the kit. This is the Modern Rose Blooms background. Everything is also available individually because if you're watching this at a later date, this kit will be sold out, but I will link to everything individually as well. So I have the background face up on my work surface, and I inked it up with clear embossing ink. And I have another couple pieces of distressed watercolor paper, and I used my anti-static powder tool first on the cardstock, and then I stamped, or just brought the paper to the stamp with the clear embossing ink, and then I'm coating that with detail clear embossing powder, and I do that to both these panels. And once they're coated with the embossing powder, I'm going to melt that with my heat tool until everything is smooth and glossy and melted. And I just tilt it, especially when I'm working clear on white or white on white. I just tilt it a lot in the light just to see that shininess to make sure everything's melted. And this is where I learned that my work surface is not level. Because I put puddles of the liquid watercolor onto my glass mat, and they start running into each other. In fact, they completely destroy each other. And I'm moving quickly. This is sped up in editing, but I'm also moving quickly, and it was too late. Like, they ran right there, ran right into each other and made a complete mess. And I couldn't use them the way I wanted it. So I wiped that up. Thankfully, it was only a few drops. It wasn't a big deal, but lesson learned, I need to fiddle and get my desk level so that I don't have to deal with things like that. But I just did a very simple wash on each of these backgrounds. And with both of these, after I applied the color, you can see it's more intense. And I actually went over it with a clean brush before it had a chance to dry to lighten it. Because again, I was going for those lighter colors that were in the pattern papers. And I wanted more subtle. But I'm going to experiment with these watercolors doing really bright backgrounds, because people who know me know I like the bright colors. But subtle's pretty too. So I just would mix the colors, do these simple washes, and then I go over it with a clean brush just to let it soften it, fade it out a little bit more. Let these completely dry. They were just taped down to a hardboard just with washi tape. Washi tape works okay. It's not the greatest for taping down watercolor pieces, but for these it was great because I just wanted to hold it as flat as possible. But I'm not too concerned because I am going to die cut all of my background pieces, including these. So once these are completely dry, just carefully peel off the tape. And then I'm going to die cut these as well as some of the pattern paper with the largest of Simon's WONKY rectangle dies. So I did all my die cutting off camera. And I also stamped and heat embossed several of the sentiments from the MANDY'S Flower Shed set. I just did that onto like strips of black cardstock and then embossed it with a detail white embossing powder. And then I've got a couple of white cardstock pieces that I die cut with a circle die. And I stamped the larger sentiment from the set onto that. And I just used the intense black ink. And then in the kit, there's this fun twine here. And I decided to wrap that around the top of this image, just right around the top of the mason jar. I thought that it was just perfect. So I wrap that around, use my little reverse tweezers here to pinch that tight so that I can tie this into a little tiny bow. And I've shown this trick so many times over the years, but yeah, reverse tweezers are your friend if you don't own these. I will have a link to them, and if you don't own them, get a pair. I have 2 pairs. I still keep telling myself I need to get more because they do grow legs and walk away half the time. I've had these for years. They are one of my must-have little tools. So yeah, got my little twine bow onto that jar. And then with the pattern paper and whatnot, I'm just adhering that together with my little Xyron tape runner. Just kind of figuring out all my little layouts here. So I've got pattern paper background and my sentiment and my little sentiment strip. So everything was adhered together flat except for my main images. Those I'm going to pop up with Simon's foam tape, which is thinner than the standard foam tape. So it just gives it a little bit of dimension without being, too much. So I'm going to pop those on, and I do that with all of the cards. So I've got all of my sentiments and main images popped up with foam tape, etc. And then for the insides of my cards, I kept things really, really simple. And I just trimmed down some more pattern papers. And all the pattern papers, they come in the kit, but they're from the Bow Bunny pack, which I don't have in front of me. So again, I'll link to it though. Really pretty papers. So I just trimmed down pieces of those and adhered them to the inside of all 4 cards and left it at that. Just kept it simple. Love the colors. I wanted the focus to be more on the outside this time, but you always have to have something on the inside of the cards. So added those pattern papers. And then once that's all done, I'm going to finish off these cards with a little bit of embellishment. I pulled up my white gel pen and just used that to add, a little bit of highlight and details to all of these images. And then I also added just a little bit of glimmer with my Stardust Jelly Roll pen. Just here and there among the images. Nothing too crazy. I just, wanted that little bit of sparkle when the light hits it. So I would add the highlights and whatnot with the white gel pen and then just add little bits here and there with the sparkle pen to all of these images. And it just gives it that little extra something. So after I'd done that with all of the images, I'm then going to add some Nouveau drops with the little tiny baby bottle. It comes in the kit. This is the Bubblegum Blush Nouveau drop. So I'm going to add this to all the cards. And then I set all of these aside so they can dry overnight. Nouveau drops need technically about 24 hours to completely dry. So I just apply them. I tap my card against something to kind of smooth out and flatten them so they look a little bit more like enamel dots. And I do that to all 4 cards, set these aside to dry, and then they're good to go. So once these are all done, I'm going to turn the flashlight on my phone so you can kind of get an idea of like the glitter on the images plus the gloss of the embossed backgrounds. It just, I love this background stamp. And yeah, that's going to finish off all 4 cards. Like I said, these are all using supplies from the August 2018 Simon Says Stamp card kit. I will link to the kit, I will link to my unboxing video, but then I'll also link to everything available individually, which everything is. So that will be in the description box below the video as well as on my blog, so you can check that out if you are interested. As always, thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. Thank you all so very much, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!